Synaptic Misfire.
You can literally see a scene where you don't see it on his back at all, and then all of a sudden it's on his back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the fact that he's not using it, it's the fact that it just comes and goes on a whim.
Yes.
Well, he's pulling it out of his,
Magical asshole?
yes. That's
a little much.
Well, he's got a pouch of many things, apparently.
It's a sphincter of many holdings.
Okay. Nope.
No? No. Okay.
Up.
All right. Good day and welcome to Synaptic Misfire. My name is JP and I'll be your host. And joining me today is Eric.
Hello, Mr. Fancy Pants.
Well, of course these pants are fancy. I gotta bring Jinko jeans back into style somehow. And my other voice that's joining me today is Derek.
You know what, JP? I've thought about it, and you're really only in charge of two things around here. Jack and shit. And Jack left town.
And I'm the shit.
Of course you are, Eric. Each week we will take another look at a relic from our pop culture past. This week we will be looking at Army of Darkness. And before we get started, I wanted to share with you guys what it was about Army of Darkness that left its biggest impression on me. This was really my first horror movie that I ever really sat down and watched. I was a sensitive child and I didn't really like a lot of blood and gore. But a friend of mine said, no, you gotta sit down and watch this movie. And he popped my cherry.
That's a little bit disturbing. But it's not even really a horror. It's more like a comedy. I didn't really see much horror element to it. I could think of 20 horror movies off the top of my head around the same time period that were way scarier than that. It was definitely just slapstick goofiness, really.
Yeah, that was honestly the thing that made me want to see it the most, is it just looked freaking hilarious. Like, I didn't get to see it till a couple years after. I mean, I think it was probably 12 or 13 at the time when it came out, but I wanted to see that movie because it just looked damn funny.
And just in case you haven't heard of Army of Darkness, we figured what better way to bring you up to speed than reading the back of the box. And yes, I mean VHS. Bound in human flesh, inked in blood, and amazingly hard to pronounce, the ancient Necronomicon, or Book of the Dead, unleashes unspeakable evil upon mankind in director Sam Raimi's outrageously hilarious sword and sorcery epic. Back to do battle with the hideous Deadites, Bruce Campbell reprises his role from the Evil Dead series as Ash, the handsome gun-toting chainsaw-armed department store clerk from S-Mart's Housewares division. Demonic forces time warp him and his 73 Oldsmobile into England's dark ages, where he romances a beauty, played by Embeth Davids, and faces legions of undead beasts, including a ghastly army of skeleton. Can Ash save the living from the evil dead, rescue his girlfriend, and get back to his own time? Overflowing with special effects, Army of Darkness will make you scream with fear and laughter. All right, so sit back and relax and join us as we go up against the Army of Darkness.
Are all men from the future loud-mouthed braggarts?
Nope. Just me, baby. Just me.
All right, before we totally dive into this, we should kind of go into a little bit of the history of the Evil Dead series and how it kind of came to this, because I know we have a lot of stuff to kind of go over and talk about where Sam Raimi's come from and how the character of Ash has evolved over time.
It's a pretty big evolution. Where to begin? Well, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and then television, where he goes into Ash versus Evil Dead. I mean, this guy's survived a very long history, and you can even fill in some of the blanks with other things, because there's the video games, almost all of them fully voiced by Bruce Campbell, and then there's the comic books, and there's nothing really kind of off limits with what you can do with Ash, because, you know, especially with the rules of magic and the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, being able to kind of transport him through time, There's no real reason you can't really transport him through space. He's been put in all sorts of situations. It's a long history. Like, I was actually surprised doing a little bit of research into Ash, just how prominent and how all over the place he is.
And a lot of this stuff that has spawned from it is all fan based, isn't it?
Nope.
It's kind of it's
No.
actually official from Sam.
That's not even the fan base stuff. Like the Evil Dead movies, Army of Darkness, and the television series are definitely 100% canon. But so are the video games in a sense, because they were all licensed, and of course Sam Raimi would have to sign off on them being made in the first place. And even all the comic book appearances in Dark Horse Comics and Marvel Comics, like, they're all technically part of it. There's nothing that's really not, and it even ties into other things that were Sam Raimi at the time too. There's a comic book crossover between Ash Williams and Xena Warrior Princess. And that's not even the end of it. Like, there's Army of Darkness Bubba Hotep crossover, right?
Oh, that I'd like to watch.
Yeah, it's just interesting how he's kind of been taken and placed in certain places and things you wouldn't think. Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, right? I'm not even kidding. Like, it's weird, but this all seems to coalesce with what's going on, because even if we want to really spoil this very quickly, the end of the movie of Army of Darkness gave an alternate ending. And some people have watched it, and some people believe that's just an alternate reality. He got shot forward to the future, but there's no reason he can't go back to the past. They haven't said that was official canon, and they've gone with the original ending to spin off so they could do Army or do anything Evil Dead later on down the road. And so they did the original ending. The studio didn't like it, so then they made them do the ending we all know and love, and that left the door open, and then they didn't touch it in terms of film until they got to Ash versus Evil Dead.
And most of what the Ash Evil Dead was spawned by the fans, because like Sam Raimi, he did those Evil Dead movies beforehand, and then he did a remake of the Evil Dead where he took it from a B-rated horror and he did like a full-on horror movie. He kind of stripped all the humor out of it, different actors of course, and that's fine, but he made it into the horror, scary, make you uneasy movie that I think he wanted to make originally with the Evil Dead, but the fans didn't like it. It didn't resonate, because at this point now everyone's come to expect the kind of machismo and the cheesy humor and all the stuff that really made the Evil Dead and Army of Darkness thrive.
It was such a departure from the original movie. That's like going to watch Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and then it's followed up by Amazing Spider-Man from
the Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, that would be like it. They wouldn't mesh well, and one fan base would clash with the other, as obviously it's seen.
And even before they released this movie, they had a lot of toss up over the title in sort of an homage to the older kinds of movies for the Evil or Army of Darkness. Sam Raimi wanted to do like the Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy style of title, where it was, like Ash versus the Evil Dead or Ash Williams versus the Army of Darkness. I think that's what he wanted the original title to be.
No, that wasn't the original title. The original title proposed was actually Medieval Dead.
Right. Yes. And I really like that. Like, it makes me think of that Sir Daniel game for the PlayStation or whatever, Medieval. But still, like, that's such a cool title, because it goes from the Evil Dead and it goes back to medieval times, Medieval Dead. That's freaking clever as hell. I loved it.
Yeah, that meshes really well. And I know it's like that on the DVDs I got. I never watched it in theaters or have seen any other copies, so I'm not too sure if this is something they just changed for the DVD, but it starts out on mine where it says Bruce Campbell versus the Army of Darkness.
Yes, that's what it was. Bruce Campbell versus Army of Darkness.
That was actually the title that stuck in Japan. That actually became a thing in Japan. That was their theatrical release of it, was Bruce Campbell versus the Evil Dead.
And he actually got known to be Captain Supermarket in Japan. There's a whole poster where they have added Campbell's soup to it and all sorts of weird stuff in the background. I'm going to have to put this up as our image or a thumbnail for this episode. There's so much going on in that picture. It's insane.
Sounds terrible.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, Medieval Dead didn't work out for one reason, and that was basically because the studio, in a way, wanted to make Army of Darkness an independent film, even though they were using a character and kind of going over Evil Dead 1 and 2 in kind of a mishmash prologue. They wanted to be able to market this completely separately. And it's interesting because you can actually independently watch any of those 3 films and never need the others at all. Like, you could go in watching Army of Darkness, never having watched anything else, and they get you up to speed enough to know the very minimal basics and then put you into Army of Darkness. That was the thought process behind going into the next film as well, was they wanted to leave it open enough that they could do anything and still make it a film that would be independent from everything else, which is kind of weird considering you would think it would be a trilogy. But it's not. It's actually very loosely done so that every film, like Evil Dead was just supposed to be a standalone. Evil Dead 2 was a remake and again a standalone. And then Army of Darkness was so far removed from the original premise of the first 2, it was a standalone. And only until they get to the 3-season series of Ash vs. Evil Dead do they actually start tying anything in.
Well, and Army of Darkness actually did a really good job of just doing a really quick rundown at the beginning to fill in all the spaces. Like, yeah, you haven't seen any of the Evil Dead movies. This is what happens. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boop. Okay, now you're here. And they did a really good job at tying that into the beginning of the movie.
And they at least go over the important bits, like, okay, he's got a chainsaw hand. You kind of need to touch on that and explain that to your audience before you get into the rest of the movie.
Yes.
And they did it quickly and succinctly at the very beginning.
Which was more than enough, and also to introduce the book. The Necronomicon becomes kind of the thing that ties everything together. It's the explanation for everything. Even in the video games and stuff, the Necronomicon's behind everything.
It's the MacGuffin.
It's the MacGuffin, but it's just got so much ancient power behind it that it's something that they have to note, and it's what affects all of Ash's reality. Like, Ash wouldn't be where he was if it wasn't for the Necronomicon constantly steering him into the trouble he's always in.
Could you imagine if this movie had been PG-13 like Universal Studios had wanted it to be? It would have been worse somehow?
Would it have been worse? That is a debatable thing. Because in all honesty, it's not what you would call the best made film, period.
No, but it's the over-the-top gore that really gets it, like that comedic effect is so over the top.
Well, there's really not all that much gore to it. If you look, you walk past, obviously, the skeletons and a couple corpses that are fighting in the main battle. There's the giant splash of red paint or blood or whatever that's supposed to be, because no human body has that much liquid in it. I'm sorry, but I mean, there's that, and yeah, but I don't think outside of that is there really any major bits of gore.
Not really. Like, the closest would probably be when we get to Evil Ash. That's about as gruesome as it really gets. And that's kind of the weird part between the themes of the 3 films. As JP was saying, the first one was kind of a horror, but with a little bit of slapstick. And then the second one was very horror. Like, they were going for trying to scare you, trying to show as much gore as possible, trying to, really make you be on the edge of your seat. And then you get to Army of Darkness, and if it wasn't for swearing and, a lot of blood everywhere, you'd swear you were watching like some dirty version of Three Stooges, man. Like, it was just slapstick. You can't sit there and look at it and go, this is very serious content. You're looking at it and it's like the blood's a mild emphasis to the ridiculousness of the humor that goes with it.
Well, but the humor would have gone as well, because then at being PG-13, they couldn't use certain topics. They can't use alcohol references or tobacco and that kind of thing. And that also affects how your movie looks, sounds, and feels.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the humor, too, it's dumb, stupid humor. I don't think there's a lot of smoking or sex or alcohol-related jokes to it. It's just, I think a lot of it, like, honestly, I didn't even realize it wasn't PG-13 until you just brought it up. It's a lot of, I think it might have a lot to do with, the scary situations or stuff like that, right?
Having skeletons alone, right?
Yeah, like, I definitely don't find it to be that mature of a movie.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand the R rating. Like, even for swearing, there's like only a couple swear words throughout the whole thing. So I was kind of mystified. It's like, why would this be R rating? And it can't be the blood. You can't take the blood seriously. Like, it's just syrup with red dye number 5, and who fucking cares, right? Like, it just gets everywhere. But you don't get to see guts. You don't get to see human
No.
intestines. You don't get to see decapitations or anything like that. I don't understand the R rating.
But at the same token, too, like looking back at the time and the era when this movie came out, it was a lot easier to get an R rating and didn't really have to do as much. And compared to what you see just on normal freaking TV today, this is comedic Muppet show stuff right here.
Well, it was then too. I don't think it was really ever serious. I remember my first viewing of it, and I was surprised at how much it was just comedy. And the special effects even looked kind of bad then. As much as some people praise some of the special effects, I still think they just looked campy and hokey, and you couldn't take it seriously. It wasn't real gore where you look at it and you're like, oh God, that's disgusting. And you turn away in vile, looking at it, it's just vile to you. You can't look at it. It's not like that. None of it was, those skeletons are moving around and you're like, those are obvious puppets. Like, and that was when I was a kid.
Well, when I was a kid, though, I was really sensitive and I was scared of anything horror. So I avoided that movie like a plague because it was a quote unquote horror movie. It had blood. Blood made me uneasy, so I never watched it. And this movie actually helped me get over a lot of that anxiety I had around those kinds of movies at the time. Because a friend of mine actually sat me down and said, "You need to watch this. It's funny." And then we watched it together and it was hilarious. And it was because it was so bad and so over the top and just, I don't know.
Like, I remember seeing the trailer for it, and it was I was laughing at it. I watched a lot of horrors when I was younger. I liked the horror movies, Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, and whatnot. I was really big into that shit when I was little. And I remember seeing the trailer for it, and I was laughing because I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And I wasn't sure if maybe that was just because I was a weird kid or something like that. But then watching the trailer again recently, I'm like, no, they really stick it as a comedy. And I think when we were watching it, Derek pointed out a very valid point. It's not just a comedy. It's a movie that kind of thinks it's three things at once. It's a medieval movie, comedy, slapstick, and a little bit of horror all mixed in together. And sometimes the one will outpower the others to such a point that you really forget what type of movie you're watching.
Yeah, it's so all over the place thematically. I had an interesting time watching it because of the swift changes and seeing the influences. Like I mentioned to Eric, this was a movie that was produced by Dino De Laurentiis, and he's known for a lot of the big sword and sorcery movies back in the time.
That's how they got the castle.
Well, there wasn't much of a castle if you see the behind the scenes stuff. It was just this wall, and then a lot of it was like painted in stuff to make it look bigger. Like they only shot from one angle. They make it seem like they're shooting from multiple angles in the courtyard, and it's really the same fucking wall every time. But Dino De Laurentiis, he was behind stuff like Conan and a lot of the big sword and sorcery pictures back in the day. So for him to have a feel production-wise as to what he wanted for the fantasy elements, you can really feel Dino's influences on things. But then Sam Raimi takes over for all the rest of it, and he mixes in his horror/comedy. And it's funny to listen to him talking, behind the scenes to the actors and stuff, because he's always going, all right, now I need you to be scary, right? Do something scary. And then he turns around and he goes, I need you to be funny. I want you to shake or something, do something funny, right? And so he was always getting the actors kind of jump one to the other, back and forth. This moment can be funny, but this moment has to be scary. And he was trying to mix it. But the thing is, I think scared was the least thing that I felt when I watched it.
No, even back in the day. And there's also a lot of little extra things that kind of went into this movie. S-Mart, I guess, was an actual chain of grocery stores.
Yes, down in New Mexico.
Oh.
So it's kind of funny that it's even mentioned. And it's like Shop Smart, Shop S-Mart. And I'm like, that's probably even a jingle. I even doubt that would probably be the company jingle at the time.
I thought that it was a joke. Like, I thought it was a spoof made up thing to spoof off of Kmart And that way they could have that kind of a store in their movie and not get sued out the ass. But I guess not. Maybe they got sponsored by S-Mart from Mexico.
Yeah, New Mexico didn't care at some point. They're just like, yeah, go ahead, use our it's advertising. We don't get it.
Is that actually what it was drawn from, or was it just a name that they came up with and it just happened to be the same name as a
that's a
chain
good
from
question.
New Mexico?
I doubt they could get away with it. A lot of big film companies usually have somebody that's, fairly aware as to what's out there and what's trademarkable. So, for them to actually not know is kind of surprising when you can kind of find that information pretty early on.
And the Oldsmobile, that 73 Oldsmobile that they referenced on the back of the box, that's apparently the same one that Sam Raimi has used in almost all of his movies. I think he's got 4 of them. One was destroyed for this show or on its way out or something. They dropped it from a crane, which ended up falling, and there's a whole sordid history around that. But they also, this is the same Oldsmobile that was in Spider-Man that Uncle Ben drove, right? If you just look at his movies, you'll see it in there somewhere.
And then once again reappearing in Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And what's funny about that is that Sam Raimi cared so little about what they saw of the car. The scene where he opens the trunk and he's going through to get the books to kind of help out with the battle and stuff. All that stuff aside from the books in the back of the trunk is actually Sam Raimi's stuff. He just never took it out. He didn't take it out because he's like, yeah, it looks like a trunk. Shoot it.
Yeah, so the comic book that's in there and all the other stuff is just his stuff that he had in the back of his trunk at the time.
Yeah, nothing play. Everybody's like, it's an Easter egg, and it's like, it has nothing to do with any of that. That's just his shit.
Oh, freaking fans are the worst, always looking into the conspiracy shit. That's why, like Eric was talking about, the S-Mart chain, was it just a happy coinkydink, or was it nefarious purposes?
Well, I don't think the purposes would have been nefarious. I think they might have just picked the name and went with it, right?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, exactly. It's a good question to ask. Some people would just have assumed, like me. All right, well, let's go on to the first kind of big scene that really makes the movie. It sets the tone for the movie. It gives you a feeling of what the character is like, the Ash Williams, and it's just full of so much fun. I believe it's called the pit bitch scene, where they have the open pit. This is right after we've caught back up with the very beginning intro of the movie, where he's walking into chains that he could Roger Rabbit himself out of, but he doesn't. And then they end up getting into the little fort or the castle area where there's this big pit. It looks like something out of Star Wars. And they're going to start dumping people in there. The first person, that's what you were talking about, Eric, the blood, right?
Oh, yeah. He just goes in and it's just quiet for a second. You hear that scream. And then it's like a fire hose of this bright red shit just comes spraying out. And I love how he goes in and everybody just stands there for a second. And then they all lean forward. Even guys that are nowhere near the fucking pit. Everybody's just leaning forward, and then all of a sudden you just see the giant spray, like a freaking volcano of blood just goes off.
A, there's not that much blood in a human body, and B, there's no way there's enough force to squirt it that high, ever.
Well, and the janitor did some real good work there, because none of that evidence is there afterwards. There's no blood. There's no splatter anywhere. Buddy's working overtime. It's like, okay, there's another one. Start scrubbing for the next one.
You'd almost think they did have fire hoses to spray it all off. I don't know. Maybe they used a toothbrush.
But I love this bit is because when they first come in and Henry's talking to Ash and he's like, yeah, I don't know you, all this other stuff. And Ash is like, all like, okay, annoyed and shit that he's in this situation. And then after Buddy gets in there and gets splattered, then he just realizes the situation he's in. He's like, oh man, I'm not with these guys. Fuck those guys. Like, just throws them out of the bus. He just backpedals, eh? He's like, no, fuck this. No, I ain't doing this. No. I got nothing to do with these guys.
Totally shows his character. He's out for himself, number one. He doesn't know any of these people. He doesn't give a shit. Now all of a sudden he realizes the danger he's in. Okay, yeah, no, get me out of here, buddies.
Yeah, the whole scene, there's so many things to pick apart about it too. The one thing that me and Eric both viewed when we were watching it is when the walls start coming in, multiple times they back up again, and it looks like they're starting all over again. And the scene lasts so long. Like you're thinking to yourself, it's only going to take like 15 seconds for those things to close in on him.
I know.
And then there was a couple other thoughts because they were very inconsistent with their shots of the cave. So if you see it, there's one back wall, the two spike walls, and then when you look from the back wall across,
there's a cave.
Yeah, it's a big open cavern.
Go that way.
Exactly. And we thought that, but then they do a shot where after he kills the initial woman that's down there, he's supposed to be facing that direction, and all of a sudden there's a wall there, and then out of that wall comes the pit bitch.
The pit bitch was actually played by the same guy who did the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Anyway, continue.
That's a random fact.
You're welcome.
That's a very random off the cuff. I'd never know. But anyway, they cut away from where he came out of the wall, and they cut back to Bruce, and then they cut back to the pit bitch, and the wall's gone, and the open space is there again. And then the walls are closing in, and we're just like, run for the place where you could stand and not get hit.
Well, even on the far wall, there was room for him just to, cozy up to the wall, and he'd have been fine. Yep. It was like the worst death trap ever made. Like Looney Tunes, the Coyote had better death traps for the Roadrunner than this fucking setup.
And they even used foam spikes for it, and you can see them as they brush up against them, how they bend and flop. It's so bad.
Well, and it's even worse for the woman that got stuck on it, because on the one side there was a spike right by her head, and they didn't shoot from that angle, but from the behind the scenes stuff, she's moving her head around, and you see the spike just bending all over the place and stuff, and it's just like, that takes me right out of it.
Well, and the chain that he ends up, using his belt to strap onto to pull himself up, which, operates the mechanism for these freaking spiked walls. It's in the middle. So when those spikes come in, they're going to pin the chain.
Yeah.
So you've really this is like a one-time deal with these spikes. Like this is the thing you use for those big moments.
And this isn't just like, oh, we forgot to put the guy's sash on the right side for this scene. This entire freaking scene is full of so many inconsistencies. It's insane.
When Ash and Henry and all those guys are brought in, Ash was in the front of the group, and Sheila, she goes to Arthur, where's my brother or whatnot, right? And he's like, well, he didn't make it. He died in battle. Instead of going to Henry, you killed my brother, your guy, because you'd think, that's the guy that's the head of the army. She goes off to this random dude that's not even dressed anything like these other guys that, they just assume that was with him for no reason, I guess. And she goes after him and beats on him and, I hate you, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, what did he do to deserve any of this? Just because he's with the guy? Well, get the guy!
After he dropped from the sky with the Oldsmobile, well, you see the one line or something on the front of the car drop that was probably, holding the car in place so it didn't go, tits forward into the ground. When Ash lands, you see a bunch of gray rectangular things that he lands on. I'm guessing they're crash pads or something. But the next scene, they're gone. So it was kind of funny. And then all of a sudden, the armies come out, and they're like, and Arthur's like, wise man, what do you think? And the wise man's like, well, I think he's the chosen one. And Arthur's like, fuck you, he's with these guys. Doesn't even take his advice into account.
The leadership's awful loose in that. They just do whatever he says.
Well, and it's a very loose allusion to it being King Arthur as well, which was on purpose by Sam Raimi. And then when you get to the part where, Bruce Campbell's out in front, it's weird that he's out in front. And then the poor guy has to suffer. Sam is kind of a little bit cruel to Bruce sometimes.
He actually gave the people, when they were throwing quote-unquote rocks, gave them potatoes to throw. Potatoes hurt, man.
That's exactly it, because he wanted the reaction from Bruce, and no one told Bruce. So he literally ended up taking like a potato in the face at one point. And the reaction of his pain is somewhat real, right? Like,
man?
You're not hitting him with something that can split him open or actually do real damage, but it's still a potato.
It'll get your attention.
Yeah, and Sam was bad for that. He was bad for always kind of doing practical jokes to Bruce, and it's like, okay, we're going to do this, but don't tell Bruce about it. And then they would just do it to Bruce and get his reaction. And Bruce would just go with it because he knew Sam was going to fuck with him. He knew that was going to happen. They'd known each other for a very long time by this point because they grew up together in Detroit. And he just knew that Sam was always going to try to take the piss out of him in some way and always hurt him and make him have real reactions. So, there's points where Bruce was really pissed off on set. And it had everything to do with Sam fucking with him. And that was one of them, was him being pelted by potatoes. And only him. They threw foam rocks at the rest of the cast because, it's not Bruce. They had to torture Bruce.
Yeah, it was just him they had to pelt.
They're different. You got to be careful with those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, those are real paid actors. Bruce here, he's working for potatoes.
The chainsaws that they used too, I guess they had several different styles. There was one that had like motion stuff on it where like it would look like a chainsaw for the up close shots. And then they had another one that was kind of made out of foam for the action sequences. They called that one Mr. Wiggly. There was pipe tobacco pumped through a hose that went up his leg and into his sleeve and then into the chainsaw. And that's how they got the smoke effect whenever it was quote unquote running.
Yeah. And there's also just a lot of logistics behind that chainsaw not being able to do anything of what it was showing. Oh, I'll turn it on and I'll start cutting through stuff. And it's not how it works. Like, you would not be able to do what he was doing with it. You could turn on full speed. You would never cut someone's head off like that. Like, he does it like he's got a sword and he just decapitates them. And it's like, no, it would catch. And
yeah, there's a good thing that chain would have caught right up in the flesh. And
yeah,
chainsaws are not really an effective tool for combat. I mean, it's going to suck. You're going to get hurt, but it'll be more frustrating for the operator than anything. Don't get me wrong, for the victim, it's going to be really frustrating too, but you're not going to get that sort of effect out of it.
And also at certain points, it shouldn't even have been working. Like, they had it go underwater and all this kind of stuff. And then you're wondering where he's getting like the proper
gas.
Well, it's not even the gas. Gas, maybe. But the proper mix of the oil that you have to put in a very specific oil to make a chainsaw run. And it's got to have a certain balance to it. And it's like, where did you guys get this? Like, how does he keep running this thing?
Oh, he's probably got a book in his trunk. He's fine.
Yeah, he's got a book of chemistry in his trunk.
He's got everything in his trunk. I was surprised how much shit Sam Raimi actually packs in there. It makes me wonder what his house is like.
Yeah, and then you get to sort of see how he behaves when now he thinks he has the upper hand after he gets up and out of the pit. He's all machismo, and he's like, oh, hey, you want some? You want a little? Huh? Do ya? Just going around to everybody, because now they're all terrified because they've seen what he does to the scary monsters.
That is literally the scene that I remember, because before we watched this, I had mentioned I haven't watched this since it pretty much first came out. That was a long time ago. That's 20 plus years. And really the only scene I remember is him coming out and doing his whole entire thing. And he's like, all right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. You see this?
This is my boomstick. It's a 12-gauge double-barreled Remington. S-Mart's top of the line. You can find this in the sporting goods department. That's right, this sweet baby was made in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Retails for about $109.95. It's got a walnut stock, cobalt blue steel, and a hair trigger. That's right, shop smart. Shop S-Mart. You got that?
And they all just kind of, shudder in fear. And then he goes on his little friggin' spiel and tries to sell it pretty much to the crowd. It's like retails for about $199.95. It's got a walnut stuck, cobalt blue steel, and a hair trigger. That's right. Shop smart. Shop S-Mart. You got that?
And these poor bastards have no clue what he's saying whatsoever. Like, none of this makes sense to them. He's sitting here pretty much trying to get an upsale. And that's probably going to be like a religious chant for them now. The chosen one that defeated the Deadites. Shop smart. Shop S-Mart. Like, is that a battle cry to them? Like, we don't know what he's saying. Apparently, that should be something we should start chanting now.
Well, that's something that happens in these movies like that when they come to the future. Like Mr. Bean, he's driving somebody's car. Someone flips on the bird. So that's how he says hello to everybody.
I mean, I got to admit, he's more of a consummate professional company man than he thought he was, because he's even hawking the stuff when he's not in the right time period to do so. So yeah. It shows that he knows his product, and that's a good thing.
Well, and the funny thing here is Henry, terrible winner. he gets released, and the first thing he does is grab one of the other guys by the face and starts laughing in his face about it. He starts like laughing at him. Thanks for the hospitality. And then him and his people leave. Well, and then Arthur's like, stop, and whatever. But so like they didn't close the gates. There was no other soldiers that could stop them. They all just sat there and watched them as, their enemies just pissed off.
Yeah, the portcullis is wide open. Any other army could have invaded at that time and no one was prepared.
No, there's not a whole lot of thinking going on with a lot of this shit in the movie.
Well, I don't think thinking was a part of it. This is the thing. Like, I get Army of Darkness is fun, and as pure entertainment, it's a hell of a ride, but even up to this point, we're not even that far into the film, and it's so out of order. Like, first, if you want to get into the technicals, this was the medieval times. We're back in the early 1300s, and yet they have a modern forged chain for the pit.
Well, hell, Arthur's got shoelaces.
Exactly. Like the very fact that he says shoelaces to him and he knows what he's referring to. I mean, it's perhaps possible at that point, but it's funny because it's like you're in your armor. At this point, you're not wearing shoelaces. So why did you look like an idiot?
Well, I do love the look he gives him. That untrusting glare, and then slowly just sort of tilts his head down a little bit and the eyes slowly go down. Like, he's like, no, maybe. And then pow, right to the kisser.
Oh, well, it's Bruce Campbell's comedic timing is aces when it comes to that kind of stuff. You can't knock the fact that, yes, in terms of a comedy, this was hilarious. I just felt that even at this point, it's a very mixed feeling of what this movie is going to be about. And with that mixed feeling, you're not 100% sure what you're going to get. And so you're not sure what you should be doing half the time. Should you be scared? Should you be laughing?
Should you be cheering him on? Should you be on the other guy's side?
So many questions. And with Bruce being pretty much unknown at this point, it's kind of hard to know you should root for him. You root for him in the sense of what Sam Raimi described of Bruce Campbell once, which is, he was the good-looking guy with the square jaw, and he's very Hollywood-esque in his look. So on average, in terms of just looking at him, you would want to cheer for him. But then you meet his attitude and his overall demeanor towards his situation, and you're like, is this guy serious? Like, what is he going to do? Is this a hero coming sort of story? And later on, no, you don't even think that. Like, you're so at odds with how you should think about Ash Williams that you're just not sure what you should be doing.
Well, and you see that in the next scene. He's sitting on the throne, getting fed, grapes and, wined and dined by all these hot chicks and whatnot. And then this chick comes in, the one that attacked him earlier, Sheila, and apologizes. And the first thing is this cocky comment is like, first you want to kill me, now you want to kiss me. And then he goes, blow. And then he spits some food out. Not at her, but it's like, well, this guy's a freaking prick. Like, he's not your stereotypical hero. Somebody finds themselves in this situation and they rise up. And yeah, he does later on, but his character really doesn't change all that much.
No, he's not even really an anti-hero, because at least an anti-hero does good. He just screws up enough to get what he wants.
Well, he plays a pretty good everyman here. Like, this is probably what a lot of people would be like, given this situation. Like, you find out you're going to get thrown into a pit. Well, fuck that. I'm not with these guys. No. Hold on. Backpedal. Do what you can to get out of it. Now you're in the clear, in the free, and everybody sort of is at awe of you. Well, now you're going to be cocky about it.
Even when he wasn't cocky about it, when he comes back later with the Necronomicon, he's telling people to get the fuck out of his face because he just doesn't want to deal with any of it anymore. He just wants to go home. Yeah, he's got such an attitude towards the whole entire situation. I just need to walk away from this as soon as possible, because he's already gone through the grinder within the first two films, which is one film. Very confusing. But he's gone through the grind enough that he just doesn't want to be part of this crazy ride anymore. He's had it.
Yeah. And going to Eric's point there about the everyman and how this is kind of how we would react. There's another scene a little bit later too, where there had this montage about him building a gauntlet replacement hand that is far more advanced than anything that we can currently do with modern technology. And a primitive screwhead himself is doing this.
Yeah, he showed a lot of mechanical know-how, considering he's in the past, and yet they do things like the mechanical hand or rebuilding the engine to the car, and you're sitting there going like, how Like, are you really good with cars? And how did you figure out the hand? And how did
He's
you
really good at everything in this movie. If you look, like he becomes a incredibly skilled fighter, incredibly skilled horseback rider. He's great with chemistry. He's a expert tactician. Like, hey, he's the perfect example of, you just give it a try and you'll succeed.
Well, that's why we went over the premise, the theory that this is actually just an exaggerated story in his head. Because we're by the end of it, he's narrating to a guy who's in the store to him, and he's just sharing his story, and you're sitting there going, how much of that was utter bullshit? Like, how much did he actually make that up? And how real is Ash Williams in his own mind?
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't actually think of it that way. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it sure does. I hadn't thought about it that way either. And that would actually make a cool premise for a remake of Army of Darkness, where they actually do it from what really happened instead of as a story being told.
All respect to Mr. Campbell. I think he's a little old to reprise his younger self.
Well, no, they would probably have to get a replacement, somebody that he's working with.
Replace Bruce Campbell? What are you, nuts? First of all, who's got that jawline all over again? Who's got that particular chin? Nobody in the world.
Christopher Reeves.
Nope, he's dead.
Well, he's kind of dead.
And he didn't even have it. I'm sorry, but you look at Bruce Campbell, and they've called him the best Hollywood headshot.
He's got a very distinct look to him, and it changes throughout this movie. Long hair, short hair, long hair, short hair.
Oh, everything that was going on, inconsistency all throughout. If we go back to that scene where you're talking about where he's like eating grapes from the women and that kind of stuff, and they're all praising him. Remember that extra? I pointed out that extra to you.
Oh, yeah.
So the wise man comes in and he has this extra with him, and it's this older guy, and I swear it's got to be like a cast member's relative or some shit. Like never acted in a movie before, because every single time you see him, he's just walking behind the wise man and he's looking at the ground intently because he's trying to hit his mark. And in that first scene that you get to see him, the wise man walks up and he doesn't look at his mark at all. He goes right up to where he's supposed to be. But the guy behind him, he's looking at the ground, and then he glances over towards where the camera is, but he doesn't look at the camera. He had to line himself up. He probably went out of the shot like 10 fucking times, and they said, look for your mark. So he directly looked at it.
Speaking of looking at the floor, when that water spills,
yeah.
Remember you pointed that out. I didn't see that. It's not as, that has an awfully smooth finished floor for a castle in the 1300s, was it?
Yeah, it was actually a modern concrete floor, like polished and everything. And I'm just like, what the hell? This isn't possible.
Couldn't you have roughed it up a little?
Yeah, they didn't even try to throw some dirt on it or something.
It's funny. It's the little things that you may not notice, and it's stuff that you can get away with. It was that, and Derek pointed like half these out where I'm just kind of like on autopilot watching the movie. It was the floor, the guy watching at his mark, because after I watched it again, I couldn't not notice that. And then the very beginning, to bring it really far back, when they're doing the recap and and Bruce Campbell's getting sucked out of the cabin, when he's going through to the portal and he's spinning around, you can see the harness, the line, the hook, everything that's spinning that he's hanging off of.
Oh yeah, it's like a Star Trek ship.
Yeah, it's I never noticed it before, but when you notice it, you can't unsee it, and it's a good thing that's a very short scene, because it is super obvious.
Especially with that older guy, because we started watching him after that, and it's like, oh, there he is again. Is he looking for his mark? Is he looking for his mark? And again, he did it again. The second time he walked up behind the guy, he had to work his way past this guy, but he was paying attention to the ground so much, he was trying to hit his mark, and then this extra's kind of sort of standing in his way, so he kind of like shoulders around him to make sure he's standing right where he needs to be. And I'm just like, oh my God, who hired this guy?
Hilarious. Like, he's like rushing to get into position. It was...
Yeah. I have to be on my mark. I have to be on my mark. That's my job. I have no lines. I have to be on my mark.
And you guys were telling me about some sort of an extra, and I went and did a watch of it after you guys mentioned it, and I'm looking. I know it's in the first little bit, and I'm looking at all the extras in the pit bitch scene, and I don't see anything. And I'm looking for something where like somebody has a Rolex or something, or somebody pulls out a phone, and they're caught doing something out of character. And now that you've said the thing for the mark, I got to go back and check that out, because I can totally picture the guy looking like we were saying about at the camera. And yeah, he got shit for that. He definitely caught shit for that and knew, don't look at the camera, but I need to know where I am. Peripheral vision. Yeah, okay, I'm good.
Well, yeah, because it was in a pure wide shot, so everybody that was in it would be end to end to the ends of the wide screen shot. So basically, the Sheila's back is at the very back of it, and so is this extras. So yeah, he definitely looks, and I was just like, I can't believe it. And Eric's like, what? And I'm just like, his mark. He's looking for his mark, and he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, fluorescent fucking paint on the ground. They just spray it on. It's usually like water soluble, so they can remove it, or they put it down as tape. But he's trying to hit his mark, and he can't do it without looking down.
Yeah, speaking of Rolex, Ash's watch, man, It must have been a Timex, because it took a licking, and I'm assuming it kept on ticking. It didn't look like it was beat to shit.
It looked like it was new the entire time, and even on his evil self, there's a copy of it, and I'm like, he fucking never took it off, did he? Like it's just nice and shiny and new, like nothing's broken. It doesn't look dirty at all.
And we're kind of jumping around here, but that reminds me, on his evil self, he has the mechanical hand. He's got the watch. He's got everything, but he didn't have the boomstick or well, obviously not the chainsaw, because he wasn't wearing it or didn't have it attached to him at the time, I guess. But could you imagine that if his evil self had the boomstick?
Everything got duplicated. Yeah, like they already duplicated his clothing. But that actually does get us on to our next scene that we're going to go after here, is where Ash gets the book and like the birth of evil Ash and that whole interaction they have, because this is kind of like the climax of the movie. This is where shit starts to get real. He's actually going to get what he's supposed to get.
Yeah, that whole scene with evil, the mini Ashes to begin with. And you know what? We originally watched the director's cut, and there was so much more added into that windmill scene that they took out. And a lot of it tied in really well to what was going on. I'm surprised they took it out. Like when he goes to step on the mini Ashes and he's yelling London Bridge is falling down. His face is covered with soot, but you don't know how. He ends up smacking his head on that soot pipe like 3-4 times until at one time it actually busts and sprays him in the face. And that's when they start laughing at him. And that's when he's like, "Arr!" And you want to talk Three Stooges shit. Like this whole scene is filled with slapstick. Oh my God.
And it's awesome. I freaking loved it. It was hilarious.
It is the scene I remember most from watching it. It came out in 92. I don't think I actually got to watch it till I was around 16, 17 years old. And it's the scene I remember the most because it was so much fun. And the one mini Ash, when he gets the fork thrown at him, it was like, this is where you see a lot of this, like the stupid stuff that they go for, that they don't really think it through. It goes back to the whole pit thing where, you know, if you take 3 steps to the left, you're out of danger by the spikes because the cave is fucking huge. There was the one guy of Henry's army. He went to run and then got nailed with the arrow from behind. He didn't bob, weave or nothing, and he got pinned to a stake. But, you know, the arrow wouldn't have pushed him into the stake. And if anything, it hit him in the back and he probably would have ran into the stake anyways. Like he hits the mini Ash, goes against the table leg or something. And then he just sort of starts looking around like he's got nowhere to go. Well, just go around the leg. You got places to go.
But it's the slapstick element. Like at that point, they were going for such pure comedy.
Oh yeah.
Like him slipping on the ground. A lot of people that would watch the theatrical wouldn't know this, but he slips on the ground on a slippery substance, and
yeah, it's like a grease or something that the minis throw down.
Yeah, the first thing is like, where did that come from? Because you don't get to see that. He just ends up slipping. There's no rhyme or reason to it. But in the original cut, it's actually a bucket of lard that the minis dump onto his head, and then he ends up slipping on it for quite a while. Like he does this little funny running, kind of trying to keep his balance. He flips up off his feet, does a one handstand, holds it for a while, and then lets his body drop back down and starts slipping on it all over again with the bucket still on his head. So there's all that kind of stuff that got missed. And like, I'm with Eric.
They should have left it all in.
Yeah, they should have left it in because it made the sequence flow a lot better. When we watched the cut version, the theatrical cut, we're like, wow, they went through that real fast. Like they didn't waste any time.
Yeah, and there's actually one of the edits is actually really rough and jarring. He does something, and then that's right before he's supposed to slip on the grease, I think, or the lard or whatever. And they cut that part out, and then all of a sudden it's like him just looking at them. And the way the cut is, it just sort of, it's there, it's in your face real quick, and it just kind of throws you off a little bit. But yeah, another thing about the minis. One of them jumps down his throat, right?
How about some hot chocolate, fucker?
Yeah, but what happened to the others? They all fucked off. And this goes to the whole Three Stooges old timey comedy type shit. Like, he's banging around, he's got the one down his throat, and you see the one mini, he's got his hands on his cheeks, and he's screaming to high heaven because he's like, ah! And then the other two run in, grab him by the arms, and sort of just
Drag him off.
Drag him off stage, stage right? It's freaking hilarious.
And there's actually a little reference that Sam Raimi had thrown into another Japanese-American B horror film called The Manster, and it's that when there's that eye in the shoulder, I guess that's a visual that was done in an older movie that he kind of idolized, I guess.
Well, Sam Raimi tends to borrow from a lot of things. Even when we finally get to the graveyard, we have to deal with him doing his little chant, right? And it's actually almost a direct rip from The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah.
But it's not quite. There's actually one word that's different within it, and that is Barato to Veratu. And that's the only difference between the two. He literally gets him to say this line, and that's somehow the magic line for everything he ends up doing in the movie. Klaatu Barata Nikto.
Yeah, and that kind of that's like the linchpin for everything that kind of goes wrong. And when he's giving him that line and he's like, oh, repeat it again. Yeah, I got your stupid words. But the set area that they're recording in is the place from that famous battle of Kirk and that lizard guy on the original Star Trek. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, those have been used in a bunch of different movies. It was also used in Power Rangers. It was also used in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. That's actually the cliffs, I believe, where the robot Bill and Ted kill Bill and Ted on. Very, very famous scenery.
Oh, yeah, and Hollywood loves to do that. They reuse their sets all the time. Like, there's this one wedge corner shop that's used in so many movies. When he's growing out of the side of Ash's head, there's a couple times where you can, like one point where it's totally claymation howling at the moon.
I love that howl.
Yeah, there's another part where you can actually see that it's just two actors that are kind of close together, or where it's been green screened and he's poking himself in the face. But the part that's the weirdest looking one is when it's the doll and he's doing the crab walk away. That just looks so goofy.
You just sort of see it dangling off his shoulder off to the one side. It's like,
well, it's even worse if you watch the director's cut of it, because there's actually one part where they go quite a ways down the hill doing that crab walk, and it's very fast speed. And as they're coming down the hill, if you look carefully between their legs, you can actually see this post that's holding up the actor all along with the animatronic. So it's coming down and you're watching it, and then you see this post holding them up in between. So they cut it from the theatrical because it was so easy to spot. Like I pointed out, Eric, I'm like, look at that thing. Like, wow, he's got a piece of wood up his ass.
Then once they finally do split, I love that little spot where he's like, what the? Who are you? Well, I'm Bad Ash. And you're Good Ash. You're goody little two shoes. And the little dance he does.
Yeah, he does. Until he gets the shot or the boomstick to the face.
Yeah.
And he goes flying back into that tree. That was a hell of a flip.
And it was such a good cut scene because, again, it was, this guy is trying to distinguish what Ash is as a character. He's saying he's good Ash. And it's like, but is he, right? Like he even mentions it in the line. He says, good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun.
Yes.
And the original line was, what did he say? I don't know about good or something like that. That was in the director's cut.
Yeah, they had a whole different line for it. It's just not as iconic though.
Oh no, the I'm the guy with the gun. Beautiful line. Love it. It's like it made that scene.
Well, it also put him back into ambiguous territory, which is kind of where we're supposed to feel with Ash anyway. Are we supposed to cheer for him? We really don't know because he's kind of a dick. He just doesn't care. He really doesn't care. And it's really just kind of more what Ash wants in the moment, and that's what he's going to fight for.
Yeah, and then when he's picking the books out at the graveyard, there's 3 of them, and they didn't warn him about that. Like, how do you miss a detail like that? And I'm curious, what the heck would have happened if he had said those words properly? Would the right book have glowed? Would, like some angels come down from heaven and go, oh, like, what the fuck?
If he had said the words, my assumption is the dead wouldn't have risen. He would have been able to grab the book and leave,
But would there have been a visual cue?
There might have been some sort of cue, because when he says it wrong, you hear the loud thunder in the background, and then the gray skies start thundering and all this other stuff, and lightning starts striking the castle. It's funny because obviously Ash obeys the laws of cartoon physics.
Yes.
Through this whole frickin' movie, it's like half the stuff he does is straight out of the Warner Brothers cartoons. Like when the first book sucks him in, and his arms are super long as he's trying to fight, getting pulled into the book. And then when he manages to get out, his jaw is 3 feet long and his face is all stretched out.
So he did get chin implants to enhance his machismo, didn't he? I knew it.
He just got it stretched out. That's all he did.
Yeah, it's just a little stretch. It's all good.
A little more square, a little longer.
So after, he gets fucked over by the first one, he's trying to place the second one, which is the one that I'm going to go for. Goes to reach for the one on the top, and then he's like, no, I'm not, you're not getting me this time. And then he goes for the one in the middle because he figures that's probably it, right? And he is chosen poorly because this one starts chomping on his hands, and it's flying around him like a fucking bat and chewing on him and whatnot. And then eventually it lands back on the pedestal, and he's looking at it and he's like, oh, I'll come back to you later. Like, he's threatening the book. Like, he's so pissed off. And then he goes to grab the third one, and that's when he realizes he can't remember the words. And I don't blame him, because I can't remember the words now, and we've just mentioned them 5 times.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
Yeah, and I love it. He looks around as if there's somebody in the freaking graveyard staring at him like, okay, let's see if he does it. If he doesn't do it, then I'm gonna have to come after or whatever. Like,
do you know the real gaff to that scene though? Is the funny part is he tries so hard to not say the last word. He goes, necktie. Oh, that's not it. It's an N-word. It's an N-word, right? But when he coughs, if you listen very carefully as he's coughing, he actually says Nikto properly.
Does he?
You actually hear the cough, and he's like, Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. And he says it properly. It's actually in there. So if there's a clip of it and you hear it, you can hear him say Nikto as he's coughing. Or maybe Klaatu, Barada, Nikto was never going to change anything.
I also noticed too that when Bad Ash comes out, he's got both hands. He grew his hand back.
Yes, I actually noticed this. I didn't notice that at this point. I did notice it at the end battle scene when he gets the hand cut off that was holding the book. They were both bone hands. So yeah, when he gets resurrected, he regained his hand somehow.
And that's actually not inconsistent, because there's a very similar thing that happens within Ash versus Evil Dead. In Ash versus Evil Dead, the same thing. A clone of himself is created, and once again, it's Bad Ash, and once again, he has his hand. And it's one of the first things that one of the other characters notices is it's like, hey, you got your hand back.
And you know what I think that is? They already took his hand.
Yeah, the Necronomicon already claimed it. It's already evil. It's already corrupted.
Oh, speaking of his hands, bringing it back to the windmill scene just a bit with the mini ashes, the perfect thing they did, if you notice, was it his right hand? That's the one that's missing, right? If you look at the minis, it's their left hand. So it'd be the perfect mirror image. So it was I didn't notice that until the last time I watched it.
The details they pay attention to, right? Like, what the fuck?
It's funny is some of the details are spot on and really cool if you notice them. And then a lot of the details are just garbage. It's so much inconsistency with a lot of it. Like, yeah, his hair when he's going through the forest heading towards the cemetery, right?
Yeah, far shots away, it's really long. Close shots, it's really short and neat and freshly cut.
That, and he gets clotheslined by a tree, falls into a giant mud puddle, and then half the time it's really wet, half the time it's super dry. So yeah, anyways, And then he does the whole Three Stooges routine out of the graveyards. They grab his tongue and they give him the eye poke and nyah, nyah, nyah. Oh, wise guy, eh? Nyah, nyah, nyah.
I love that. That made me laugh so hard.
That's actually, there's a bit in there that actually a guy had to mention in the extras, and he was actually saying that Bruce Campbell's the king of acting backwards. He says nobody in the industry can do it quite like Bruce, because there's one point where the hand goes up into his mouth, and it's actually a reverse shot. It's actually being pulled out of his mouth, but Bruce is able to say the words and articulate them backwards as he's saying them.
Really?
Because you hear him say his line before it gets shoved into his mouth, and you see his mouth moving to it properly, but it's actually him acting backwards.
Huh.
So he's really amazing at that. And I didn't even think it was a reverse shot. I thought it was like somehow they had like a string and they pulled it up and made it look like it went into his mouth from the side or something.
Yeah, I just figured somebody was, they had a guy under the stage or something just jamming them, or like a mechanism that just shot it up into his mouth or something.
Yep. But it was actually it coming out, and then he reverse says what he's supposed to say.
And I love it too, because those hands, they look like something you get out of a dollar store off of those cheap ass skeletons. Like they literally just flop around, and when he puts his hand up to prevent the eye pokes, then they come in from either side. They're just so many cool little gags. I freaking loved it.
That had to be second to the windmill with the mini ashes.
The mini ashes was kind of funny in a way, but when you get to that scene, all hope is lost for anything serious.
Oh yeah, it's super slapstick. It's 100%. That's exactly what it is.
And it's especially the part where he starts screaming into the camera, and then you see the 20 fists hit him all at once, and he's like, smack, 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 and you're like, oh yeah, here we go. We've lost any dramatic traction we could have.
Well, especially the scene that JP mentions, right? They do the old poke to the eyes, and then he puts his hand up to block, and he does that ha ha ha, and then you get the two fingers from either side jamming him in the eyes, and he's like, yeah.
They look like they actually got him in the eye in a couple of those takes.
I have no doubts that Sam didn't give a shit.
got him in the eye. Perfect reaction.
Shove it into Bruce's nostril and pull it. Do it. Put it into his mouth. Pull his cheeks. He probably had no idea for half of them. And then he started going with it because, he knows what fucking Sam's up to.
And like what? He gets the finger poke of doom to his eyes, face smacked, fish hooked. Like it's every cliche Three Stooges face smack routine happens to him in that graveyard.
Yeah, in that tiny little scene. Did they at least keep the whole bit of that between the two cuts?
If I remember correctly, I think they did. I think that whole scene was...
They did. Yeah,
awesome.
They totally did. The major scene that got cut was the windmill and part of the evil ash stuff.
Well, and the climax with the battle at the castle. Holy crap, was that ever switched up? And it was a lot longer.
And you know what? That's actually where we're headed to next, is the final battle. We're going to go to the conclusion of this show. Let's wrap things up and see how they actually could bring this to a head.
Well, the whole entire end battle is kind of interesting in a way that all of a sudden, again, Ash Williams is able to just become a genius with chemistry. He creates a whole bunch of bombs. Probably one of the most genuinely funny parts was just when the guy picked up like that little bag of powder and he started moving it towards the candle.
Yes.
And you see Bruce look over and he's like, whoa,
No.
what the hell are you doing?
He pulls the candle away after he's like, no, don't do that. And the guy turns around, he just reaches over, slowly pulls the candle towards himself, just like not even stopping, looking at the guy. It's the montage, right? They're prepping for battle.
Well, because he comes back, he's got the book under his arm, and the first thing they say is like, well, did you say the words? Well, yeah, I said them.
Well,
more
and
or
you
less.
can tell his conscience sort of got at him here, because he's like, yeah, I did. Fuck, leave me alone. Just like he comes in the whole castle, he's like, fucking get out of my way, like Derek mentioned earlier. And then as they start, question him a little bit more, that's when he's sort of like, well, I didn't quite say them the way I was supposed to, right? He could have just said, fuck it. Yeah, I did. Now get me the hell home.
When you removed the Necronomicon from the cradle, did you speak the words?
Yeah, basically.
Did you speak the exact words?
Look, maybe I didn't say every single little tiny syllable, no, but basically I said them, yeah.
Dung-eating fool! Thou hast doomed us all!
And then he's just sort of, he admits what he did, and sort of, takes his beatings a little bit. So yeah, he sort of admits there's his mistake. They sort of shun him, right? And this is the weird thing is the first one to really turn his back on him is the blacksmith, and the blacksmith has sort of been like this emotional cornerstone for this whole movie. Like, at the beginning when Ash, he's fighting the Deadite and the hand gets lopped off and it hits the one guy in the face. So the guy gets a Deadite face palm. It's the blacksmith that looks and laughs. And then later on, it's him that sort of looks at Ash all disappointed and then walks away. And then it's also him again. That's the first guy that when Ash does his big speech is like, I have your back or whatever. But what's with this guy? What makes this guy the guy that goes, yeah, he's got his back. We're going to go with him.
The bigger question is, why isn't he king?
Yeah.
Obviously he's a man of influence.
Yeah. The king the king's like, no, fuck you. And then the blacksmith's like, no, I got your back. And then everybody's like, well, if the blacksmith is on board, that does put a lot of faith in the Arthur, right?
No, it's Ted Raimi that follows in after that. You have my sword, and you're like, oh, it's Ted Raimi. There he is. Yeah. I knew he was in here somewhere.
He was in there. He had a few different roles in that one.
Yes, he did.
So then they go from, and this is another thing. Ash is like the best speaker ever known to man. I mean, better than Trump, who's the best with all of his words. He sits there, does his spiel. Everybody who is, they're all turned his back on him. They don't trust him. He's caused all this, the Deadites to come after them because they just said, the book will get you home, but you've done fucked us up real bad. And then all of a sudden he's like, does his spiel. And now everybody's like, okay, yeah, okay, sure. Like, why? This guy has done nothing but cause you guys problems, and all of a sudden now you want to back up back him up.
Hey, they took his girl.
They did take his girl.
They took Sheila, and he can't stand for that. He's got to be the hero.
If only he had a ranged weapon of sorts, he might have been able to stop that creature from taking her.
Maybe, if only.
He had something that could go boom and drop it.
Like some sort of stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very odd, isn't it? It's very convenient at the points where they actually remove that from any encounter he has. And then all of a sudden it's on his back again. And you're like, where was it? Because this is not an object you just lose, right?
No.
Well, it's that and the chainsaw. And I'm sort of like JP did in the Star Trek one. I'm going to do here. I'm going to make an excuse for the movie. He's got limited ammunition. He's got limited fuel and oil for the chainsaw. So he's got to use them sparsely. He can't just, lop off every Deadite he sees at the neck, right? And he can't just shoot every single one.
Like a zombie game.
I get the limitations, but at the same time, you can literally see a scene where you don't see it on his back at all. And then all of a sudden it's on his back.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the fact that he's not using it. It's the fact that it just comes and goes on a whim.
Yes.
Well, he's pulling it out of his...
magical asshole?
Yes.
That's a little much, don't you think?
Well, he's got a pouch of many things, apparently.
It's a sphincter of many holdings.
Okay. No.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. So she's kidnapped now, right?
Yes.
So now she becomes one of the Deadites after the most cringy kiss that you could ever have on TV.
That's longer in the director's cut as well.
Oh, yeah.
It goes on.
It's cringy. It's
there's tongue and everything.
Oh, yeah. It was gross. I mean,
yeah.
Kudos to that makeup because you look at it and you go, Jesus. What did they do to you, Ash?
Yeah. No, I like that they did that. Like, they had a really heavy influence on, like, the practical special effects in this movie. I guess it's from the times, too. But they didn't have to involve so many different styles, right?
Well, that was the weird part, is that what felt most out of place, even though it's kind of a tribute and it's something that Sam Raimi does with all of his films. He always loves to tribute stuff. That's why we see so many tributes within this film alone.
Yeah.
But his last one was basically a nod to Harryhausen and his skeleton scene from Jason and the Argonauts. So he was using stop motion skeletons, but very sparingly. And the points that they jump in take you out of it very jarringly, because up until that point, they're using a puppet or they're using a person within a suit, because they had female dancers who had very slim bodies
Yeah.
put into certain skeletal costumes for very smooth movement and far shots.
For the zombies that had a little bit more meat on their bones, there was peoples in costumes. They also had a bunch of people, they had, like you were saying, the mix of the stop motion, but they had it all together in the same action frame shot, and that's what you're saying took you out of it?
Well, it that takes you out of it, or even if you're watching him fight up close to a puppet and it was very smooth motion, and then you jump back out, and then all of a sudden you jump back in and it's a stop motion skeleton, then you jump back out and you jump back in and it's a puppet one again. So the stop motion in this isn't to Harryhausen standards. It's not as smooth.
No.
And then it's so sparingly used that what was the point? They figured out so many ways to make the puppets and everything work well. I think they should have just taken the one direction instead of doing 3 different ways of expressing them.
Yeah, and I think the perfect example for that is when they, when they start to charge the castle, cry havoc. You see these 2 horses, horseback riders, start heading with the army. One guy is an actual guy in a costume, and on the other horse is a dummy, and you see it just sort of flopping backwards and getting jarred around, and it really takes you out of it. And there was a lot of points in that battle scene where it was just exactly like Derek said. You'd see, people in costumes, or it's the stop motion, or just the dummies bouncing around. And the one scene where you see the skeleton on fire and he's charging and his head just sort of falls off,
And then he's quiet.
and then he's quiet. I can't help but wonder if that was an accident, like the head wasn't meant to fall off. And they just went with it. I mean, they could have. It might have been. But it just seems like something so funny that happened that, yeah, let's go with it because that was perfect. It was the example of, say, The Simpsons when Homer's like, I am so smart, SMRT.
Mm-hmm.
He was supposed to, the line was supposed to be SMART. He wasn't supposed to screw it up.
But he did.
Yeah, so I wonder if it was one of those things.
Well, I think there was a lot of that kind of going on in this, especially this final battle scene, because it's so evolved. But I think kind of going to the different styles, it's what we see in a lot of movies today, except now instead of doing stop motion, they have CGI in place of it. It's so they can do different things, like with say the Muppet style skeletons. You can't really have them helping each other up out of the grave effectively. So now you have to use the stop motion. Now you have another skeleton that's actually, cheering and moving around and physically doing stuff. Well, that has to be a person in a suit. This guy's going to get his hand chopped off and he needs to actually, be present. So now we have to use the puppet again. They just didn't do a very good job of making it interweave.
Yeah.
Again, the reality of this is so juxtaposed right off the hop. We're not even trying to take it seriously anymore at this point. So it didn't matter. Like I almost feel sometimes Sam is doing corny effects like that almost on purpose. Like he wants you to know, yeah, don't take any of this seriously. We're not even trying to make it look real. I wonder if that's kind of the purpose. But again, I also believe deep down, it's also just him wanting to give a tribute to something he enjoyed as a kid. And Jason and the Argonauts scene, I mean, when Harryhausen did that scene, when he did all the stop motion skeletons, that was a feat. That was a huge feat at the time. Nobody had ever attempted that. And as a special effect for that time period, it was an amazing sequence. And he just likes to pay tribute to the people he enjoys, the people he loved, the things he grew up with, so much so that it influences his films almost to a detrimental point, but it is what gives Sam Raimi his style and his charm.
I think what really makes me enjoy, or in this whole final battle thing, I think what I enjoyed the most were the puppet type skeletons, where they were like not actually, they weren't a dude in a suit, they weren't stop motion, it was just like a doll that was done. And to your point there about having fun with it and just, like nothing was expected, there's one point where Ash, after the car blows up, I want to touch on that too, but after the car blows up, he's walking away and then 3 skeletons come at him, and one is very clearly thrown at him from offset. He grabs it and snaps it in half with his leg, right? Like, I'm sure he was like, here, take it, kill it, take it, kill it. Here's another one, kill it.
Well, that one and the skeleton that he pulls off of Buddy's back that's trying to stab him. Oh man, they look like it's so bad it's good, right? Like this is honestly one of the best B movies out there. I gotta put it in that category because that's what it is.
Oh, it is. And that one line of the skeleton who runs up in front of the camera, let's get out of here.
Yeah, at the end.
Yeah, I loved how that had to be a very different type of voice. They're all up to that point. We're very evil skeletons, and then it's like, let's get out of here.
Let's get the hell out of here. Like a very fro German guy. Yeah. But anyway, where are we going next? Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh Jesus.
I'm stuck.
Nope. Broken. We got a broken host.
Yeah, the host got broke. Going back to the car. I love how they had that propeller on in front of it because, again, they had these skeletons set up in their little arena, and he's like, okay, hit some.
Yeah, and that was another thing I wanted to bring up. In the director's cut, you actually see him run for the hills, more or less. He gets it looks like he's feeling overwhelmed, and he runs into out of the courtyard. And Arthur's like, "Whoa!" He turned his back on us, and all that sort of stuff. So again, he's doubting out Ash. And then the next thing you know, he's blasting out in the Oldsmobile. And this battle was so drawn out. Like there was things that they probably could have left in from the director's cut in this, but a lot of it was so it drew out a lot of stuff that it didn't need to. And even to the point where like the battle felt over for quite a while before Henry's army eventually came in to join and help out. Yeah, it seemed a lot better the way it seemed really well done the way they did it for the theatrical release. Whereas Henry's army pretty much picked up the pieces and, fought off what was left. It was so drawn out. But that car, if you look, there's scenes where Ash is driving it by himself, and there's scenes where there's another soldier in there, taking swings at people and stuff like that. And it's like, then it'll flash back and it's just Ash. Then it goes back and it's both of them, and it's just Ash. It's both of them, back, forth. And when the car flips, when you see him bail, that poor knight is still in the car. So he's like dead.
But even so, like you're saying, flashing around, and the scene is changing from one to another, back and forth. But at least in this movie, they had good fight scenes where the camera was steady. You saw the action happen. It wasn't this Jason Bourne freaking shaky camera fight where you don't know what the fuck is going on, but you hear punchy noises and fushies.
For this battle, I will have to agree with you. For the earlier stuff, especially when the old woman or whatever attacks Ash in the courtroom, it's something like out of Batman Begins. The camera's bouncing all over the place, and it's really hard to follow. I mean, you got an idea of what's going on, but it did get better come the final battle.
And they used it in specific areas. I do know the scene you're talking about and the kind of camera that they used. They did intentionally to kind of hide some of the action. When you're punching somebody, you're punching past them. So we need to kind of shift the camera around here. And by the shaky camera, it does heighten your tensions.
Well, but then you get to the later scenes like we're talking about, and there's a point where Bruce Campbell, gotta sit there and actually give him kudos for this. He's actually doing a dual sword fight with two swords, one in each hand, with one opponent on each end, going up the stairs at the same time. And I have to imagine that was actually very difficult for him to do. The stuntmen have always made Bruce look a hell of a lot better than he is, but that was one thing where he had to be very ambidextrous, keep his balance, and move up the stairs in time with the two stuntmen that he was fighting.
You're going down.
Yeah,
I'm going up.
Yeah, but it was very well done. It was very well done, and it was very interesting to see just how much physicality Bruce Campbell had to put into it. And it's too bad that they just didn't showcase that for other scenes where, there was that shaky cam that was... I get what Sam Raimi was trying to do, but it became unnecessary. Like, by the last half of the film, you never see it again. So again, it's a change in styles. I think that's the one thing that maybe drew this back. As successful as the movie was, one thing is it was very all over the place. Technically, it was all over the place. Thematically, it was all over the place. And for some people, it would be hard to watch and still be entertained. I mean, if you just take it for what it is, it's just a romp and you're just having a laugh and take it for a comedy. That's probably the best way to absorb it. Otherwise, you're going to sit there and you're just going to be like, wow, this is kind of what's going on. I don't know anymore.
Something that's kind of odd too about the very end of this movie is that after the battle, they fight, they kill the guy, he goes and explodes. He's going to be like the Terminator. He's just going to reassemble himself and come back. How do you kill something that's already dead?
Well, that's kind of the point to what Ash is supposed to do all throughout his history is he kills what's considered the unkillable.
Because of what he did with the book and didn't say the word. So they're haunting him now.
But he's also the one thing that the book keeps alluding to about him being the chosen one. When they brought that up in Army of Darkness, it's very interesting because I had started into watching Ash versus Evil Dead before I started watching Army of Darkness.
Oh, okay.
And again, the book in it alludes to him being the chosen one. And there's actually literally a picture of him standing on what looks like a mountain of bodies, holding up his boomstick over his head and what looks to be possibly a chainsaw on his one hand. And it's like a very rough pictograph drawing inside the Necronomicon, but it's referring to him as being the guy. He's the only one that can put a stop to this. So it's interesting that he's kind of been chosen, and it shows through the movies. He's the only one to survive. He's the only one to keep going. He's the only one that keeps dropping these suckers.
Yeah, and just having that kind of a thing in your movie or in your lore, it opens the door for you to do so much more. And how did that get in there? Maybe he went further back in the past. Maybe he's the one who made the Necronomicon. Like you can totally go anywhere you want with that kind of a setup.
The one thing I did like about the final battle is they did toss. I mean, there was a bunch of things I liked about the final battle, but they did really well. Like, let's get all of our last one-liners in while we can. Like, he's going up the stairs. You're going down. I'm going up. He's fighting Sheila's Deadite form, and she's like, "You found me beautiful at once." And he's like, "Honey, you got real ugly." And it's shit like that. Like it's like you can't at this point. You cannot take this movie serious at any bit, at any point. It is like that ship has sailed. It's all goofy shit from here on out. It's all comedy. The archers, when they go to, when they're charging the castle and you see the fuses going down and the archers are just staring at it like,
we've seen what this does.
Yeah. like this is going to blow up in our faces. And of course it's the last second, fire, but the look on their faces, they're really unnerved.
They had no idea what to expect. No.
Yeah, there was another bit there when he calls out with the Oldsmobile, the souped up Oldsmobile. He's like, "Say hello to the 21st century."
That was such a gaffe, and we picked up on that right away. We're like, wait a minute, wouldn't you mean 20th century? And then I was like, Ash is not a genius. As much as he plays himself off to be this guy that came up with this whole battle plan, again, it feeds into my theory that he's making shit up as he goes along because he's not really smart.
No, he's even trying to do a smart ass line. He came off as an idiot, and he kind of is one, right? Like, but it's stuff like that. A lot of the one-liners, like I was saying, even the one skeleton that's trying to come up after him before he gets pulled up to the top of the parapet. And what does he say? He's like, "I'll cut your gizzard out," and he does it that sort of higher pitched voice. And then once Ash, cuts the rope and goes up, and then the weight of rocks comes crashing down. He does that over-exaggerated before it gets crushed.
Oh, don't forget his line after he misses him. Oh, I missed.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot.
Fucking love that.
He was so disappointed.
Oh, I missed.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we keep bouncing back and forth on is the skeletons, even though they looked hokey, they had some of the greatest little personalities to them. It was great. Like they did a real good job with what they did, even though a lot of what they did looks like shit.
They gave it character, which is something that they don't really do. Like how many zombies in The Walking Dead had character? Not many. I don't know. I've never seen it, so I shouldn't use that as a reference.
Well, that could be a little different because you're talking zombies and there's no real...
Oh, zombies can have personality. Come on. You get a fat zombie, you got instant personality.
When evil Ash gets launched with the catapult full of gunpowder or whatever, and he blows his top. Like it's the last little bit of
and you
cheese.
See the brain.
Yeah, like the top of the skull pops off, and it's just you pretty much see steam coming out of what should be where his ears are, right? It's just like, Yeah, and then and
so
then
bad.
and then all the little fucking skeletons are running loose. They're like, yeah, let's get the fuck out of here. So you got all the risen dead are now all throughout the land. The little mini ashes. That's the thing, is what happened to these fuckers? That bugs the shit out of me.
Yeah, I know. They all just sort of disappeared. Some of them may have been dismembered, but, they're not dead.
Yeah. Well, they are dead.
Or they're not stopped. Yeah, I don't know.
The battle ends very abruptly, and even in the director's cut, it doesn't make sense. Like, they did cut it better for the theatrical version, so at least Henry comes in at a better time and he's more helpful to them. But all in all, the battle at the very end doesn't make any sense. Yeah, Evil Ash dies and then they're done. It's just over. They're done. There isn't the rest of them to take care of or anything like that. And then they all meet in the courtyard and they have their little pretend standoff. And then, and then everybody cheers and yay, hero of the day kind of stuff. But I was just like, man, that wrapped up real quick, didn't it? Like,
yeah, real nice and tidy. Yeah.
It's like they're running out of time for their movie. It's like, okay, we got to end this now.
Yeah, the army's like, cheese it, I'm out of here. And then they become best friends. Everybody's happy.
And then the scene where he got the fluid, and it was different for both. So much different. So in the first one, they recorded it correctly. Like the wise man said his lines, and he's basically sitting there telling him, you need to take 6 drops,
5
for
drops.
each. Or no, 6. He told him 6. He ended up taking
6?
7. Yeah, he ended up taking 7. So he told him, take 6 drops, one for each century, because he's going to go from the 1300s to the 1900s, right?
Oh, yeah.
So he's supposed to take 6 drops for every century, and that's how long you'll sleep, blah, blah, blah. In the theatrical cut, they dub over it, and they just tell him to drink it, and he'll wake up in his time. and I point that out, Eric, and I'm like, see how his mouth is moving very differently, but they're pulling the shot further back, so you can't really see that. And Eric's just like, oh, shit, they are, too. And I'm like, yeah, they didn't even refilm that scene. They just used the old one and recorded over it. Because that one was done very hastily. Like, they had to call Bruce Campbell back to do that whole sequence in S-Mart where he fights one more Deadite, because they didn't like the ending. The original ending, he falls asleep, and it's really drawn out. Like, you get to see him go through the ages and sleep, and he's eventually under webs and has a really long beard, and he digs himself out, and he comes out and he finds it's the future, and it's a post-apocalyptic future. Earth has kind of been destroyed, and he screams out, no.
Yeah. I slept too long. And then the fade to black, and then you see the credits, and you just hear him laugh. Like, he snapped. This was the point of no return for the poor guy.
And that's what the studio didn't like, is that it didn't like the option of no return. They wanted to always leave an option open, because at this point, in their minds, it was kind of considered a mini franchise anyway. So they turned around and they told Sam, first of all, we need a better ending for him to, have kind of a happy ending to a point. And then we need it so it's open-ended that we can do something else.
Yeah, because it was quite the downer ending, right? Because it's like, he, as much of an ass as he is, you want to see him get back to his time and whatever, right? And then it just
all the shit that happened to him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then Eric's favorite scene is the end one, because he loves the trampoline.
Oh, that freaking Power Ranger flippy bullshit with the Deadite.
Nothing beats that fucking fight.
Oh my god.
That is the best choreographed fight in the entire movie, in my opinion, just because at that point, no shits were given. Just take it so far over the top, it's stupid. And, he grabs the Remington rifle, and literally he fires something like 38 bullets, and that only hold 15 or 14 or something like that. Like, it's not meant to hold that many, but he's sitting there just pounding off the shots, and like, he kicks this cart so it starts rolling, and then he shoots, and then he jumps onto it and he shoots some more, and you're like, what was the point to any of that? Couldn't you just, I don't know, hop off the counter and walk towards her and do the same thing?
Well, he had to make it flashy, right? It's all about presentation.
Oh, yeah, then she flips, and then he shoots her some more, and she pushes off the wall, and then he shoots her some more, and then she bounces off the trampoline, and he shoots her some more, and you're just like, wow. And then he does the big flip at the end, and then slides it into the, like, he had time to put on that holster, and it's supposed to be a back holster, but he puts it on his leg like he's got a 6-shooter, and he like flips it around and he slides it right in. I gotta commend Bruce Campbell for taking the time to learn how to flip all these guns in his hand and do this shit, because he made it seamless. And the one thing that you don't pick up on is how smooth he is doing it every time and not coming close to screwing it up. It looks like he's done it a million times. And
well, that is actually an intentional thing on Bruce Campbell's part because he's left-handed.
Yes.
So they wanted to make sure he asked, can my right hand be chopped off? That way I still have my dominant hand to be able to do other things with.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's he's good at it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like when he spins the shotgun, that's a staple thing that he does in Ash vs. Evil Dead as well. He sits there and he spins it on his finger, right, and then he slides it into his holster on his back, and you're just like, man, he doesn't let that go. Like he can spin that sucker, and it's hard to do. It's harder
to practice.
Yeah, it's way harder than people think. So he's got an amazing coordination. Like, you know, despite what you think of the film and kind of how cheesy the effects and everything are, Bruce Campbell put in a lot of work. Like he put in a lot of work to do everything he was doing, you know, dual hand sword fighting and spinning of guns and you know, doing the kicks and taking the hits and literally sometimes taking the hits, like real hits to sell the effect, right? You know, the guy went through a lot and that's probably the main thing that stands out at you is Bruce isn't afraid to do anything. And that's probably why he became so popular as well from this character, was you got to see that Bruce will do literally anything. He's not afraid to take on something tough or do something crazy or zany. He'll do it all.
And there was a little bit of himself in that role too. Like as with any actor in the role, they do put a little bit of themselves into it. So there was
a little. I thought this was an autobiography of Bruce Campbell's life.
Autobiography, right?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the guy in an interview and he talks? He's friggin' Ash Williams 24/7. I swear he is.
He talks like and the things he does. He goes, I fucking hate fans. Well, not that he hates fans. He says he doesn't understand how people like Beyonce and all these people can have fans clamoring over them 24/7. He says he thinks it's cool the way he has fans. Every once in a while, somebody walking down the street be like, "Hey, you're Bruce Campbell." He'd be like, "Yeah, that's me." Instead of being constantly hounded.
The interesting thing about Bruce Campbell is he's so anti-Hollywood, and it shows in one thing, especially his filmography. This Army of Darkness was the first and last time that he was ever cast as a leading man in a film, in a high-end production film.
Everything else, he's just bit parts.
It's either bit parts or it's an independent film. But for a major studio film, this is the first and last time he was a leading man, was Army of Darkness. So he's so anti-Hollywood in so many ways. It's very interesting to listen to him talk about the Hollywood effect. One of my favorite conversations with him was when he got interviewed by people talking about Xena, working on Xena and Hercules. And he said he loved it because, you know, it's great. It's so diverse and there's so many different things happening and you get to see so many different things. And he said, but the thing I don't understand is why it didn't win more awards. Like you have a procedural doctor show and it gets best costume at the Grammys or at the award ceremonies, and you're wondering why, because all they did was just go and order scrubs. And he said every single costume you got to see in Xena and Hercules was handmade and was used once for all the different extras. It was used once, and they always came up with new costumes and they always created new ones. And they came up with such interesting designs. Why wasn't they ever, you know, nominated for that? And he thinks the Hollywood machine to a point is kind of broken.
The one thing I really liked about when they transitioned from him leaving the castle at the end to present day as he's telling his story, and if this is all being from his point of view, obviously there's been a little bit of embellishment, right? Because that's just Ash's character, I think. But he's telling it to Ted Raimi. So apparently he's, you know, working with one of the villagers' descendants at S-Mart later on down the line.
Right. He didn't even have glasses in the past scene.
No, I don't think they had glasses.
Oh, I thought he had his glasses on in the other scenes.
No, I don't think so. No.
Oh, they're at least smart enough for that.
The interesting thing is, even though he's telling this story to Ted Raimi's character as a fellow employee of S-Mart, I still am of the theory that either some of it is bullshit or all of it is. And I almost want to think that when he went and chopped off his hand, he passed out and had a friggin' fever dream.
That would explain a lot of the shit in this movie. And
that's what all this is just him telling the fever dream like it really happened. Because at this point, he's already out of his mind, right? Like he's seen shit he shouldn't have seen.
Yeah.
So I think that his brain made up the rest, and then he woke up, quote unquote, in the future after drinking the potion, and that's not any any of how it happened. I almost want to pretend that he had a fever dream, passed out, woke up, and then went back home.
I gotta wonder how much of this shit that he tells this guy, like how many stories does he normally come up with? Because he's telling him this story about what just happened to him, and he looks so bored.
Yeah, he looks like, yeah, okay, whatever, Ash. Like,
Yeah, and he's like, so did you say the words properly this time? And he's like, yeah, mostly. And then you could just sort of see him kind of ponder it, like, oh wait, the last time I mostly said it right, shit hit the fan. So now he's kind of pondering, am I okay? Is everything okay?
And well, that kind of like, it can't be just a fever dream, because then there's a deadite that shows up in the supermarket.
That's not what I'm disputing. The deadite can show up because he's encountered them in reality before. That's not in dispute here. But I think after he cut off his hand and thought that he defeated everybody, he passed out, woke up, and in that time he had that dream of being back in 1300, because nothing about it was accurate. Nothing about it was even remotely what the 1300s were like. And then there's just the fact that there's all that slapstick in there. And what's funny about even mentioning that slapstick is that is something that never comes up ever again. If you watch Evil Dead 1 and you watch Evil Dead 2, very, very horror heavy. And even if you go to Ash versus the Evil Dead, there's no slapstick. There's no comedy. Like, there's comedy. There's comedy in the sense that Bruce Campbell is always cracking quips and making jokes, but the rest of it's played off a little bit more seriously.
It's not the slapsticks, Three Stooges type comedy anymore.
No face stretching, no mini Ashes, no skeletons doing all the Three Stooges stuff. None of that's present in any of the rest of it. So it makes me believe that no matter what, Army of Darkness was his fever dream. You can't convince me otherwise. Sam Raimi, quote me on it. Quote me on it, motherfucker.
Prove us wrong.
It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so the deadite showing up at the end is just another day in Ash's life. But as for the rest of it, like, I don't believe that any of that happened, honestly.
Well, because in that scene, doesn't he have like a bandage on his head?
Yeah, so what? He also still had the cuts on his face when he went into the past. And then he came out of the past. It was the same cuts.
Before I totally forget, speaking of cuts on his face, during that last battle scene, he had fallen down the flight of stairs or something like that. He had done some sort of a tumble where the pin that was on his cloak, on his costume, ended up gashing open his face. And he didn't think anything of it because he's already got like 6 or 7 other cuts on his face, until someone's like, no, you're like dripping blood. You're bleeding your own blood this time. So they took him to the hospital. And at the hospital, they're like, so what am I fixing? What am I looking at here?
Yeah, they couldn't tell because they had all the makeup cuts still on his face. And they're like, which one's the real one?
Yeah, and he actually had to go for plastic surgery for that slash.
Yeah, and then
it was a good gash.
And then he was back on set like a few days later because it's Ash.
And they could just add it in. It's just another scratch on his face.
Yep. Yeah, no, that it's interesting how they even went and hid his other actual facial scar, because he has a very prominent L-shaped scar on his chin. And in the sequence, they made it a cut, so they actually put cut makeup over top of his actual scar.
Oh,
that's
smart.
Try to hide the fact that it was there, because they're still trying to make him look Hollywood handsome, and Hollywood handsome doesn't have scars on their face.
So I guess that kind of moves us on to the end of the show. We're finished it. Derek, what was it that worked for you?
What worked for me? Nothing. I will put it this way. I will literally put it this way. If you're trying to sit there and dissect it as a piece of film, it's pretty awful. I don't think it had any consistency. I don't think before or after Sam Raimi has ever done anything so off the wall. In my opinion, he's always at least kept his style consistent with whatever else he does. But Army of Darkness is everywhere. It's like he just, whatever. Let's do whatever. Let's have fun with it. We were given a big budget. This is obviously going to be Universal Pictures' fault, no matter how we go about it, for giving me such a big budget. But let's have something really fun, and he did that. But the drawback is that stylistically, it's all over the place. The effects are also kind of all over the place. There's no one consistent set of rules that they're following with those particular special effects that are going into it. So if I were to look at it in the stylistic terms, or even just as a film, no chance does it do anything for me. However, that being said, if you let your brain go and you just sit there and you just want to laugh at something because it's that fucking god awful. This is the world's most successfully done B movie because it doesn't even try to hide the fact. It's not even one of those B movies that tries to pretend it could be A-list. It is literally a B movie being a B movie to the nth degree. So if you get to a point where you're looking at it in that way and you're able to let go and just be entertained by it and let it be mindless, it's great. And with Bruce Campbell, the type of person he is and the type of presence he brings off, you know you're in for slapstick, and he's doing it perfectly. Like, the one thing that saves it for me probably is him, because he's giving the right type of vibe all the way through. He's aware that it's going to be viewed as kind of a offbeat, off-kilter comedy. So he sells it as such, no problem. And that's what makes it amazing. That's why I think people clamor to this, is mostly Bruce Campbell made an amazing performance and just fit the tone that was being done with the film perfectly. And everybody else is just playing their parts around him. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And he's the only one that's fully self-aware that this is completely B-movie schlock.
Okay, so then Eric, what was your positive takeaways, or what was your takeaway from the show?
Yeah, you know what? I'd have to agree with Derek on this one. I remember watching it, like I said, when I was 16, and I had so much fun with it. Now when I look at it and I'm trying to, critique it, I guess, it's a fun movie, but yeah, you really need to shut your brain off for it. It's like the stuff with if that whole windmill bit wasn't in it, I honestly don't know if I would enjoy the movie nearly as much as I did. I think that was the main draw for the movie, because a lot of the stuff kind of just happens and moves him into the places that he needs to be. And then, the windmill stuff happens is a good comedy bit. But yeah, that's where the tone really, really changes. Yes. And so, if you want to look at it as like a really good movie or something like that you really want to, enjoy and not have to be pulled out of it at any point, this isn't that movie. If you want a movie, like Derek said, yeah, shut the brain off and just enjoy, because oh my god, it is still a fun movie. It is a lot of fun, as long as you don't take any offense to any of the mishaps or the goofs, or if you're not looking to pick it apart, it's a great movie. If you get bugged by that stuff, it's got to be the best B movie ever made, like I said earlier.
Awesome. Yeah, I see what you guys are talking about, and having to shut your brain off to be able to actually enjoy the movie. I don't think it's quite that bad. I think that there was a lot of clever things that they had put into the movie that really helped it stand out. The humor, even all this time later, is still on point. It's kind of a timeless sort of, like, that's why slapstick works so well, is it's timeless. It was smarter of a movie than we're giving it credit for, even though they had inconsistencies. I think they just didn't care as much about certain aspects of the movie and then gave concessions for others because they had an overall vision they wanted to maintain. So for me, some of the things that really worked were the special effects. As hokey and obviously fake they had that effort. They went through that extra mile to get that dummy to crab walk alongside him. They went that extra mile to have an eyeball in his shoulder looking around. They had the mini ashes, the sequence where he's punching himself in the face. These are all really poorly done camera tricks or stop motion stuff, but that's the kind of effort that you don't even see into movies anymore. I feel so much of the computer generated stuff is just a cheap, well, it's not cheap, sorry. It's just an easier way to do what you want to do and without limitations. Having those limitations grounds it more in reality. Okay, guys, so now let's tie things up at the end of the show. We don't like the boring old 10 out of 10 system. Let's liven it up. Instead of stars, what out of 10 would you guys give this movie? Eric, you go first.
I'm kind of leaning between 6 and 7. I'll probably, just because I have so much, like, I love the movie. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of shat on it a little bit, but I do love the movie. So you know what? I'm gonna give it a 7 Hails to the King out of 10.
Nice. All right, Derek. So what are you gonna give this out of 10?
Wow. So that's a tough one. I am actually going to go a bit lower than Eric on this one. I enjoy it to a point, but I definitely wouldn't view it like every weekend or every year. It's probably going to be another 20 years before I watch it again. But having said that, it's still got some charm. It's still definitely got Bruce Campbell as a powerhouse in his own way. I would have to give it, let's see, 6 dropped 88 Oldsmobiles out of 10.
Nice.
Excellent. So, you went lower than Eric, and I kind of have to go even lower for mine. I give this 3 out of 10 Three Stooges skeletons, because it's a skeleton of a comedy show where they've just kind of picked apart all the good stuff. And what you're left with isn't impressive, it's not well done, but for whatever reason, it's still kind of funny. So it's not a good movie, but to enjoy it, it doesn't have to be good.
It's a very interesting viewpoint. I didn't think you'd go that low.
Yeah, no, especially with your final thought, as it were. I thought you'd go a little higher. I
3 out of 10. That just a bad movie.
I was gonna go 6, but I had to bump it up to 7. I don't know why.
All personal preference.
Thanks for misfiring along with us today. So until next time.
Hail to the king, baby.
Theme song by Danya Vadovos. All clips of Army of Darkness remain the property of Universal Pictures. If you enjoyed your time here today, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating and comment wherever podcasts live. If you would like to join the conversation, have some cinematic suggestions, or any other burning questions, please email us at synapticmisfire2020@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Synaptic Podcast, or find us on Facebook by searching for Synaptic Misfire. Just remember to keep your eyes open for that little green brain.